Шановні колеги, Український медіа-центр.
Our center continues with an extraordinary briefing by Deputy Head of the Kyiv City State Administration, Mr. Radutskiy, and Chief Surgeon General of Kyiv, Mr. Ruban, about the situation with fires around the city. Good afternoon. With your permission, I will give you a brief information, very short one, and will gladly take your questions given the wealth of information already in the media, not to waste our time on that. You probably know the situation in Kyiv and that it has become increasingly dangerous because of change with the wind direction. As of this morning, we had northwestern wind coming and bringing smoke into Kyiv, and because of that, the mayor of the city ordered an extraordinary sitting of the Commission for Environmental Safety and an extraordinary commission with the municipal authority of Kyiv to decide and recommend educational institutions stop the training process. Unfortunately, by the time the Commission started its session, our children already went to school. Because of that, they have reduced learning time today, and with no change in situation tomorrow, and there are strong hints it will not change, the education process will be withheld. Besides, the mayor limited the entry of long-haul vehicles to the city in the daytime. An address was issued to Kyiv Oblast State Administration asking them to talk to the drivers coming into Kyiv to consult them about the limited access to the capital. Media resources of the Kyiv City State Administration have been used to inform Kyivites to limit the use of private vehicles. Given high temperatures we've been suffering through, the mayor ordered watering of city streets and green areas in the city. I'm not going to give you information about the level of harmful substances in the ambient air, because this will be the information that the Surgeon General of Kyiv will tell you, but we would like you to relay the information as much as possible. This information will concern safety measures for city residents. And I think that's not air pollution itself, but the panic among the people may be the most harmful. I've got tens and hundreds of calls from around the city as to whether it is still safe to be here, whether we should better leave for another city. As concerns proper way of weathering out the situation for residents, as regards all sorts of masks, you do not really need them, because the sulfur anhydride that we have in air, it seeps through even through isolation masks, so it will be of no help. There are different recommendations from medics, but I will tell you that the most important thing is to avoid blood clotting because of excess heat and little water intake. It particularly concerns elderly and unhealthy people. Given the average recommendation of 2 liters daily for a person, we would recommend to increase it to 3.5 liters a day to dilute a bit the blood in this heat situation and to facilitate the discharge of toxins, we would always advise you to do wet cleaning in your apartments for the sake of your children and yourselves. For those with old type windows, faulty windows with slits openings, we would suggest you tapering these openings to minimize the intake of polluted air and to promptly renew this insulation as necessary. Please also limit street exposure for children and elderly people. If you have air conditioning units in your apartments or premises, please use them in internal circulation mode to avoid intake of outside air in the system. Every morning, don't forget to thoroughly cleanse your eyes, your face, to get rid of harmful substances, particularly concerning those accumulated on our eyelids. And then it's time for my colleague Oleh to give you information about the ambient air condition. Concerning the lab test results for our ambient air, as regards ambient air lab testing, following the information circulated in the media, as well as the information collected from the emergency department in the city of Kyiv, we started our lab testing measures at 5 p.m. yesterday to monitor ambient air quality and the emergency situation. As of 5:45, we got information that sulfur anhydride MAD was 18 times higher in Brovary along Brovary highway, and local administration was immediately notified and prompt measures were taken. We had control monitoring measures taken throughout the night to develop recommendations for this morning regarding measures to be taken in the city of Kyiv. On 6 a.m. this morning, MAD doses 5, 6, 7 times higher than the normal one were registered across the city of Kyiv. And according to orders of Mr. Pontilev, Deputy Chair of the Sanitary and Epidemiological Service of Kyiv, a temporary ban on long-haul trucks entering in the city was issued. It was also decided to put restrictions on education process in kindergarten and schools in the city of Kyiv, given the abnormal high temperatures we are facing. And the temperature in educational institutions should not exceed 21 or 25 degrees Celsius max, and this normally is done through ventilating premises, which is not possible in given ambient situation. Because of that, given the weather forecasts, we've issued this recommendation to limit the education process for today and to temporarily withhold it for all education institutions tomorrow. And the recommendations further developed by Public Health Safety Department again say against prolonged exposure, outside exposure for elderly people, people with chronic diseases, underage children. Then wet cleansing is thoroughly recommended in all in-house premises, particularly given that sulfur anhydride is well soluble in water, and as it is heavier than the ambient air, it effectively sediments on the floor. That is, by doing wet cleansing, at mopping of floors, you allow for the reduction of its concentration inside premises. And you surely need to increase your intake of natural absorbing fluids like water, yogurts, milk containing products. For water, it's 2+ liters daily. For children, it depends on the body weight. As regards the dynamics of lab testing and monitoring procedures, we do it on an hourly basis. And as of 10 a.m. today, we got an 5 to 7 increase in concentration and a bit of reduction. 3 to 4 time med increase was registered at about noon, and 2 to 3 increase of maximum level dose has been registered just about an hour ago. It is also related to changes in wind direction, and also partially due to organization measure taken to reduce the number of vehicles on the streets and additional watering of the streets. And you can check yourself that the number of cars, vehicles and trucks in the city is really far less than in your ordinary day, and you can check it yourself actually. So as of today, we are going to continue with our measures to further control the situation. We'll promptly inform Kyivites and guests of the city regarding any changes of the situation.
The content of the poisonous compounds in there may raise, but we encourage you to follow up our messages. Before the briefing, you mentioned that there are a lot of calls to the ambulance, and please comment on this. When it is really needed to call for ambulance, and when we should wait. What are the symptoms when you are poisoned with smoke? The slow speech, improper orientation in the space, then very hard pulse, headache, and inattentiveness and low concentration. Of course, all those symptoms might be caused not by the smoke, but nevertheless, what we can observe today in Kyiv, quite often mothers call to the ambulance and say, it seems to me that my child is poisoned. When the ambulance comes, they find out that the children are not poisoned, and we have not yet found any case when children or even adults are poisoned with the air, but in case of those symptoms which I mentioned, you should call to the ambulance. Please ask the questions to the topic. You mentioned increase of what compounds there. We have increased contents, the anhydride, the sulfur anhydride. It is a product of burned marshes, etc. You might remember that 2 months ago, when there was a fire in the oil stock company, there was the same component in the air. You mentioned the same tragedy 2 months ago. How would you compare the environmental situation at that time and now? As of now, the situation last Thursday, when there was smog, it is worse than it was during that fire 2 months ago. At that time, we registered many compounds in there, but today we have sulfur anhydride, which influences human body. Sulfur anhydride, SO2. The sulfur anhydride is recognized by the standards of Ukraine, 0.20 milligrams per cubic meters. This is the threshold concentration. This is rather a tough threshold. In Europe, the same threshold could be 10 or even 20 times more. But in Ukraine, we have this threshold standard, and those people who are sensitive to this compound, 1.6 micrograms per cubic meter could be felt by sensitive people. Yesterday we felt it because it increased that threshold 10 or 17 times. How much money does it cost for the budget to correct the situation? Maybe you can plant something on that meshes. If you mean the forests on the left bank, then law enforcement are doing the investigation. Whether this was done intentionally or not, but the meshes around and moors around Kyiv, that's natural. And actually, in our budget, we reserve money for these situations. Last week, Kyiv transferred 6 million to the Kyiv Oblast for fire extinguishing measures. Today, again, we wash the streets, and this is again very expensive. But we will have the correct figures at the very end of the operation, of rescue operation. Actually, in our annual budget, we allocate something for emergency situations like this. Mr. Radutskiy has to leave, and we have time just for one question. What diseases can be provoked with this sulfur anhydride in the air? It won't provoke some specific disease. But there are chronic diseases which might manifestate themselves. That's like hypertonia, that's like allergy, that's like the breathing system of humans. For example, angina may be provoked by some bacteria, Staphylococcus bacteria, but the sulfur anhydride won't cause any specific disease. Actually, could you say that today's environmental situation is equal to to excessive smoking. This is the same analog if you say that all people did barbecue yesterday. Whether you expect to comment on the massive vaccination in Kyiv. There is a suspicion about poliomyelitis in the western Ukraine. Currently, the Ministry of Healthcare inspection is now studying this issue. That's why the Ministry of Healthcare and Sanitary Epidemiological Service is now thinking about vaccination. And again, panic. Long ago, it was written that vaccination could be harmful, but nobody proved that the children died. Nobody proved that this was the reason of death, but this is the reason of what was happened in the Western Ukraine. Stetsuk, could you please specify what's going on the fire site and how long this may last, whether the fire extinguishers work there or no. It's not a question to me, because that's going on in Kyiv Oblast. We definitely know that the state emergency service is working hard there, and they engaged the additional civil resources. Nobody is able to predict because I am not a professional. But we do everything possible to overcome the problem. In Kyiv Oblast, when there was a fire on the fuel storage, nobody was able to predict. As an ordinary citizen, I should say that I saw the weather forecast for Saturday and Sunday. They predict rains, and I hope that within 2-3 days this will finish for the better. But it's natural, not just for Ukraine, but for other countries. The next briefing will be in several minutes.